The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
Big Money Siege, I want to start in Calgary. The feel-good story of the NHL through the first handful of games has been the Calgary Flames. 4-0-1 to start off their season. Not a lot of people thought they'd start off this way. We did touch off on them a little bit last week, but there's one report that surfaced in the last couple of days that I want to bring up. Frank Saravalli mentioned the idea that, but he mentioned the report that the Flames might be in the market for a right shot center, somewhere in the middle of their lineup. And we can get into the fact that if the Flames are actually still interested in this type of player, I'm really interested in wondering if they should be in that discussion. What are you hearing on that story, first of all, and then we can get to the second part?
Well, look, there's not a lot of trades that happen this time of year.
No.
But, it's quite normal for a front office to identify areas where it's looking to improve the roster. And I think it would make some sense for a team like Calgary, especially because they're not of the mind that a lot of us on the outside should be, that they're necessarily still deep into this rebuild, that they're veteran players that are still on the roster, aren't on expiring contracts by and large. I'm thinking of the Kadris and Colemans and players of this ilk that, want to be around the Flames here and that the team wants to kind of keep trying to put a winning product on the ice around. And so, I don't know. The same way when we were talking about some of the teams that are gotten slow to the gates, I do want to tap the brakes a little on where this will go. But look at the Western Conference right now. I think that there's at least a case to be made that some things might be open to the Flames. Some other teams in the division that have struggled, but that also I just think, what are they really? And so maybe there is a path to an unlikely sort of run towards a playoffs or creating that kind of excitement there. And so, in that context where management is not of a mind where they want to pull it down to the studs, I think Craig Conroy has been consistent with this, but he's worried about, creating an atmosphere where players think it's okay to lose and then saying, well, can you just flip the switch and say, now we're trying to win? I mean, we've seen lots of places where that does become problematic. You almost wonder if it's a cultural thing. Like why is Buffalo perpetually in this cycle? Even now having good players on the roster. I mean, I don't know where you attribute all that to, but that team did aggressively try to lose under a couple of previous regimes ago, management wise. Tim Murray was the tank commander back in the day. If you remember, not so subtly disguising his intentions to try to win the rights to draft Connor McDavid. Got a pretty good secondary prize in drafting Jack Eichel that year, but that didn't work out. And now here we are a couple cycles later, and they're still trying to become a winning team, but create a winning program there. They've even dug into their past. And so, I can see where if you're in the Flames ownership or management, you're looking at this and you're saying, man, like, do we really want to tear everything down? I mean, obviously last year they were in a unique situation where a lot of those players, I think all of them that they traded away, were on expiring deals. So something had to be decided. Either you're signing them to an extension or you're dealing them away. And we saw Lindholm and Hanifin, Zadorov, all these guys ended up being traded out the door. And so, it's an interesting idea of building, but I just don't really know what's out there. I mean, I think that might be a follow-up for you. Where do you find this right shot center and what's it going to cost you? And the truth is it's probably going to take a little bit of time before they can make that move. And obviously, if that's the case, they're going to have more data on where their team's at, a better idea of, is this just a crazy start or is there something a little more sustainable there?
I wonder if this is the buy low move the Flames need that could also satisfy this one thing that I know Craig Conroy has been looking for, which is to get this young player between the ages of 18 and 23. Like, I know in the summer I tried to write a piece. I did write a piece about some targets who are in that age range. And I was thinking more reclamation projects who could kind of fit in that ilk. And kind of looking back at that list now, it's kind of funny. Just, I don't know if any of these names that are on this list right now would even be viable, right? Like Marco Rossi at this point, who early on in the offseason, it was being floated around that he could have been a trade possibility from our guys at the Athletic in Minnesota. I don't think the Minnesota Wild might be interested in that. Dawson Mercer, who's since signed in New Jersey. That's another name that would be off the board. Capo Caco, I'm not sure about his situation with the New York Rangers right now. Like, I wonder where that could come from, if that is a part of their roster they want to satisfy on that front. Maybe this is just the Calgary Flames just trying to catch lightning in a bottle with their fast start and just seeing if there is a GM who might have that quick trigger finger and say, hey, you know what, we need to make some kind of change really quickly. Maybe the Calgary Flames are that team to make a trade with. But I think it is just kind of exciting at the fact that because the Flames have proven so many people wrong through the first 5 games that they are in that position. I would think, though, if you're the Flames, like, this is not the opportunity where you're saying, hey, man, we're a much better team than we are. Let's put all the chips in. I would think if the Flames are looking to do this, they'd have to be buying low, where they maybe part with a draft pick or some other prospect lower on the lower end of what they have. And then they get themselves a player who could possibly fit that bill. That would be my guess for that situation.
Sure. And look, they've accumulated some capital that way with the deals they made last year. They've obviously added more players to their pipeline. A lot of those trades weren't just straight draft pick trades. They added, some actual real live humans that are, trying to push their way up and make it into the NHL. And so they probably are in a position where you can make those types of deals. I think that it's a pretty interesting strategy to go that way. I mean, it's a little bit what was behind the St. Louis Blues offer sheets, right? I mean, and it's turned out pretty well there so far. Broberg's got a 6-game point streak to start the year. But the Blues were adding players that they felt were ready to take the next step right away as NHL players. And, with a little bit more ice time and opportunity to start the year, I think that they've been proven right early in the season. I mean, sometimes there are those players that just haven't quite taken that next jump, and maybe they're blocked in certain situations by, established players on the roster they're trying to make. It's kind of a compelling idea. And I think ultimately it really does come back to the idea that, Craig Conroy just doesn't feel right about anything close to a full scale tear down, rebuild kind of situation. And so, it's a signal here that the Flames aren't going to go that route. I like some of the guys that they added in the offseason too. Yeah, I don't know if you saw the clip going about Ryan Lomberg, but man, what a vibes guy he is. Obviously been being part of that Panthers Cup last year, but there was something the Flames, I think the team itself put out with him behind the scenes, pumping his guys up in the dressing room and just really bringing a lot of positive reinforcement. I think sometimes bringing some character guys that have a little bit of belief in actually can help raise the group, because Calgary's issue hasn't been all talent, right? I mean, some of their players, you think of Huberdeau is the easiest guy to point to because of what he makes and the scale of the trade that was made to get him. But he's not performed up to his contract the last 2 years. But he's off to a pretty good start this season, and it's sort of like if they can get some of the players to be a little bit more what they're supposed to be. These are established NHL guys. This isn't a roster of. It's not all just kids trying to learn their way in the league. They do have an element of that. Some younger players coming along, the Zaris and the like. But I do think that they have the core of something that can be at least competitive on a nightly basis, which is ultimately, I'm sure Flames fans are getting excited about, whoa, could this be a crazy playoff year that no one saw coming? But the truth is you want to be playing meaningful games and at least based on the first 2 weeks, they're in a position where they should be able to do that here as long as they can sustain it. I'll put my hand up and be honest for everyone. I'm a little skeptical whether they're going to be able to sort of keep this going throughout the year. But I mean, this is the beauty of it. They can, what is my opinion really worth? And I'm not the only one out there thinking that this is going to be a hard slog for a team like this. I noticed in training camp when you were still in Calgary, like you were mentioning, like a lot of the guys were saying, like people are sleeping on us, and they were sort of expressing that belief in camp. And lo and behold, they've started in a way that I didn't see coming, and so maybe they can keep shoving my opinions down my throat by winning games.
One other thing I just want to mention, I just want to be real for a second here. You mentioned Ryan Lomberg. I only got to talk to him like a couple times during training camp, but I think when he signed, I got to talk to him over the phone. Dude is really, like, I sense the energy that he has, and I could totally understand why he would vibe with everyone in that locker room. And I have to admit, like, I think I know I made the right decision to move to Ottawa and cover the Ottawa Senators, and I'm really happy about it. But I know if I was still in Calgary, I would be talking to Ryan Lomberg as many times as I could, because not only does he have like the good vibe, but he knows what it takes to win, and he's very well spoken. And I think he's able to speak on so many different topics with regards to hockey and certain players, and him having that familiarity with a guy like Jonathan Huberdeau as an example, or him being able to hype up younger players on the team. Like, that's a guy I know for me, if I'm writing a story about some of the guys on this Calgary Flames team, I would go to Ryan Lomberg a lot and ask him for a lot of insight. I know if you were in the same shoes as me, you would probably think similarly as well.
Sure. Well, and we got the next best thing here in Toronto, because Steven Lorentz, his former teammate from Florida, has joined the Leafs this year, and he has a lot of the same kind of qualities and characteristics. Very upbeat guy, thoughtful guy. We mentioned him before. He's living out his dream as a local Toronto area player, from Kitchener Waterloo area, but and playing for his childhood team. But you start to see why maybe the Panthers had what it took to get to 2 straight cup finals and win. It's obviously their high end skill. I mean, you win that title because of Bobrovsky and Barkov and Kachuk and all the main players on the team, Bennett and Reinhart, right down the list. But also they had a pretty special fabric around the outside, and it's probably, it can help us illustrate. I know the Panthers, are going through it right now with some injuries to some of those top players I mentioned, but it part of what's going to make it tough to, a third straight year to get to a cup final, I think, is inevitably the cap costs you some of those guys, some of those quality, veterans that round out your roster, and they're not in plentiful supply everywhere else just to replace them. So, good. Love the vibe, guys. I mean, as much as hockey's won by the most skill and talent on the ice, I do think there's an added element of, in a dressing room, there's different personalities. There's different things that have to go on to have everyone performing at their best. And there's certainly something to be said for good team players.
I don't think this will be the last time we talk about the Calgary Flames on this podcast, but also this, in particular this podcast, because someone in Ask CJ asked a Flames related question. I'm very curious about your answer to said question.
I haven't screened the questions, so they're all going to be a mystery to me when we get to that segment.
Yes, I love the fact that you don't screen these questions, especially on days like today. That's called a tease, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, let's get to the Nashville Predators. We've mentioned a whole bunch of teams who have had either concerning starts or good starts. We have not touched off at all on the Nashville Predators, who have since fallen to 0-5. This team, 2 years ago, they were selling off assets. They almost made the playoffs selling off assets. They didn't make the playoffs, but they almost did. And then last year, they made the playoffs. And then they doubled down and signed some key free agents. And it's only 5 games, but they're 0-5 to start off the season. What have you made of the Nashville Predators start to the 2024-2025 campaign?
I've been a little shocked by it, to be honest. I like their off season. I do realize that just because you spend the most money on July 1st or get some of the biggest name players in free agency doesn't automatically equate to being a great team. I mean, probably for the reasons I mentioned. Maybe the parts don't fit quite right, or maybe it takes some time to figure out how best to use a Stamkos and where Marchessault plays, and Brady Shea and all the likes of this. But I mean, I don't think anyone would have any reason to believe that they were going to be at the bottom of the division after any meaningful amount of time. And it gets rolling in the wrong direction. I mean, we talk about vibe guys. I mean, I feel like this is like an all vibe team with the likes of Ryan O'Reilly, Luke Shen. Shout out to Luke, who just hit his 1,000th NHL game, which is
shout out to him.
It's a great milestone for any player, but especially someone like Luke, who had a couple stints in the American Hockey League 6, 7, 8 years ago. Had to wonder at that point of his NHL career was at an end, and he's managed a renaissance here in part with the work he's done with Adam Oates to make him a more efficient and effective player. Anyway, that's a sidebar, but they have a lot of these guys. I mean, Stamkos, Marchessault, these are all players I have a lot of respect for that I think are, in addition to their talent on the ice, bring an added element, and man, they're going through it already. And I saw Stamkos say on the weekend when they lost their most recent game that, it gets magnified when it's from the start of the year. Whereas, sometimes in the middle of the season, you might have this kind of losing streak and everyone's able to move past it a little bit more easily. But, I don't have any high level takeaways. I mean, they're certainly not scoring enough. Seeing more pucks get by UC Saros than you'd expect in this early going stages. To me, it's not one specific issue. Like, it's not one area of their game that isn't there. They just are not, they haven't come together. They haven't played a sustainable way to find a way to get wins. I mean, they've been in some close games. I mean, even the scores that look lopsided, there's a couple games there where they gave up empty net goals and the like. So, I do think that they're probably not as far off as 0-5 looks, but you also can't get past the fact 0-5 is a pretty big hole. I mean, you've got to now play at X number of level just to get back to 500 to get to, where you're in a position where you're trending towards a playoff spot. And make no mistake about it, for the reasons you mentioned there. 2 years ago, David Poile was departing the scene as the general manager. He was setting the table for his predecessor, Barry Trotz, when he made some of those deals, the Tanners, deal to Tampa that got them 5 draft picks and some of the other trades that they made at the time, Granlund, to sort of refresh things on the fly. But, Nashville's a market. I think that they know they need to be competitive to keep their fans in it. There's a lot of other things in that city that can vie for your entertainment and sporting dollar. And so, they need to find a way to get back on a roll here and basically make use of all this. I mean, you didn't spend all that money on Stamkos, Shea, and Marchessault to think about next year. I mean, it was all done with the designs of being a quality team this year. And it's very interesting to see if they can pull out of it. Because if they can, I mean, what's the next shoe to drop? I don't know what that would be there.
On a scale of 1 to 10 on the worry meter, how are you feeling about the Nashville Predators?
7.5. Maybe ticking towards 8 on depending on how the wind's blowing that morning. I mean, it's just like last year, the Edmonton 2-9-1, and you expected, but like they had McDavid, you knew they were going to probably come out of it. 0-5, it's a big hole. It only takes 2 weeks to get into that hole. It probably takes a month to 6 weeks of good play to get out of it in terms of, because you're probably, I know that the Preds did rip off that crazy win streak last year when they canceled their U2 trip or whatever. But, I'm not sure that you can count on a 12 or 13 game winning streak. I mean, maybe it'll happen for them, but more than likely you're winning 3, lose 1, win 2, lose 1, and that's what it's going to take just to get back. So, I am concerned there. I don't see an easy fix either. I mean, Andrew Burnett's only been coaching that team. It's just his second season as a head coach. I don't see like one big move here that's going to shake things up. I mean, that's where it's a pretty veteran team. You have Yossi and Forsberg and O'Reilly and Stamkos, Marchessault. I mean, all these guys have been through a lot as NHL players. Even that they made a big call in the summer, right? They doubled down on UC Saros to be their goalie, signed him to an extension, ultimately in sort of a manner of speaking, cost them Yaroslav Askarov, the young goalie they traded to San Jose because, he saw his path to the eventual net in Nashville blocked by that move. And so, they've really pushed their chips in the table to be good right now. And they haven't been nearly good enough through 2 weeks of the season.
And you mentioned being in a hole the way that the Predators are and how hard it is to get out of it. They're in a division where the Winnipeg Jets are 5-0 and they've played really well to start off their season. That's another feel-good story we can get into if we want. The Dallas Stars, who are my pick to win the Stanley Cup this year, they're also at the top of the Central Division. And then you have teams like Utah, who we've also bigged up in this division as well. Minnesota, St. Louis, and Chicago. Look about Chicago. They have a better record than the Nashville Predators right now. And don't sleep on Colorado right now. They woke up. That's a sleeping giant that I do not want to perturb in any way. You see Nathan McKinnon go 1-on-3 against the Anaheim Ducks over the weekend.
They danced with danger in that game. I know they had like the shot attempts were crazy, but they still found themselves in overtime in danger of remaining winless at that point. But then McKinnon called game. I mean, the truth is Makar is kind of off to a sketchy start in Colorado, and obviously all the players are missing. We've talked about in previous shows, but McKinnon is an X factor for them. I mean, you're right. Don't sleep on him.
Really off to that bad of a start? I don't know if I agree with that. I mean,
yeah, dude leads. I don't know. the underlying numbers are painting a bad concern. Not okay. It's really early. Sorry, I don't want to. But
no. But for sure. We should get into this.
Last season, they weren't good for him. The underlyings, and again this year, you just wonder. I don't know. I'd have to dig into it more, but I'm just saying it's right now. Nathan McKinnon is pulling that team, I think, in a lot of directions. And you've heard Makar actually be very open and honest in interviews and call out his own play. And so, I don't know that he's been up to the level that, he was at 2 years ago, for example.
I think that's amazing to look at a guy like Cale Makar, who I think it's 12 points to start the year. He's tied already for the league lead in power play points with Jake Sanderson out in Ottawa. And to know that, I haven't looked at the underlying numbers myself with Cale Makar, but to know that is likely a season which is on the sketchy side is insane for the quality of player that Cale Makar is.
And that's the thing. I don't want to drag him here. I don't want to belittle this point because, we'd all like to fail in the way he's failing or struggle in the way he's struggling, right? But I'm just saying, because the bar is set pretty high for him. I don't know. I think, his season's off to a bit of an up and down start. That being said, you're right. 12 points. I mean, he's still producing at one end of the ice. I just think there's a lot happening at the other end too, that you wouldn't want to see if you're the Avalanche. But I mean, the truth is they're mucking through it right now with a lineup that's not NHL contender quality because of all the players on the sidelines. I mean, we didn't mention it, but over the weekend, Val Nichushkin came back and is now skating in Denver. He can rejoin practice as of November 13th. So, that's, 3 weeks and a little bit away. Don't know what to expect from him after, him being in the player assistance program since last year's playoffs. But, maybe if he can get up to speed, you're only 3, 4, 5 weeks at most away from him rejoining the lineup. There's maybe some hope on the horizon for the Avalanche. You're right. Don't sleep on them. To me, it could go in all kinds of directions there. And that's what makes their season so interesting. It's the West I feel like the West is fairly wide open. I'm with you. I still believe Dallas is probably the team to beat. I still am pretty high on Edmonton despite their start for this year, but there's a lot of teams, I don't know which direction it's going to go for them, that they could end up being really good. Nashville could pull their way out of this. Colorado could get everyone healthy and they could be a top tier contender. I think Vegas is probably being slept on a little bit, to be honest. I think
they are.
They had kind of a weird summer and there wasn't a lot to focus on who they brought in, really. I know they made some trades and they get, Alexander Holtz and they sign Olofsson away from Buffalo. And it's well, what are these moves when you're losing Chandler Stevenson and you're losing Marchessault? But I just think don't sleep on the Golden Knights. To me, they're the one team that they're kind of like my X factor in the West. But anyway, it's a wide open conference. Whereas I sort of feel like the East, the teams we thought were going to be really good look like they're going to be really good. And then it's a bit of a jump ball between, whether it ends up being the Rangers or Boston. Tampa's off to a nice start. Florida's hanging in with their injuries. Toronto's had a pretty good go there. So, the West to me seems a little less settled, I guess, in the early going.
We should stay in the West for a second. The Vancouver Canucks, they're seeming to pick up a little bit in the Pacific Division. At the very least, they've won their last 2 games. But Elias Pettersson has been a topic of discussion out there. Only 2 points in his first 5 games. People have been a bit concerned, to say the least. I've used that word a lot on this podcast in Vancouver. I'm curious what you think of Elias Pettersson through his first few games.
Well, I think the concern for him is last year didn't end well either, right? And, where he ended up last year in terms of points and everything, he had a great season. He earned the big contract extension they signed him to. But his play flagged a little down the stretch and through the playoffs. He was not as effective, even though, they got to game 7 of the second round. He was not dominant. He wasn't tilting the games enough for them, doing what, someone paid over $11 million is paid to do. And, then you couple that with a slow start out of the gates here this season. And I think that's where the concern starts to grow for Pettersson. I've seen other people where Bruce Boudreau was on radio in Toronto and mentioned, his former coach, mentioned that he almost doesn't look happy on the ice or something. He's just wondering what's going on. I mean, I don't have the answer, but I do think it's certainly something to monitor, because, he's such an important part of that team. I mean, they've got a lot there in Vancouver. JT Miller's off to a nice start. Besser's in a contract year. I think you can count on a pretty good year out of him, given what he's playing for. Like their blue line. You hope Demko gets back and is healthy at some point here. But, they do have a team, when I talk about a Western Conference that's maybe a bit open, that, if a lot of the best case scenarios fall in place, and I would include Elias Pettersson having a strong season being among those things that would be at the top of the list they need to happen, they could be in the mix, come the playoffs. And so, it's a strange one to me. I mean, there's no obvious reason on the surface for that. He's playing a lot. The organization believes in him. They've paid him. But he's just not getting it done enough on the ice. He did have a really nice pass on a goal in Philadelphia, if you saw that, to Holglander on the weekend. So, maybe make some of those plays. You start to, it's not just, add points to the total, but you're feeling good about yourself. Maybe things will come along here, but I'm not smashing the concernometer on him just yet. Cause I really want to keep in mind that 4 or 5 games is 4 or 5 games, but, he's got to pick it up, and I'm sure he's feeling more pressure internally than anything we could put on him externally.
One more thing before we get to Ask CJ, Chris. This news story happened after we recorded our last episode on Thursday. Jake Ottinger signing that extension in Dallas, 8 years, $66 million. Why does every goalie all of a sudden want to make an AAV of $8.25 million?
It's a new marketplace benchmark, right? The Swayman contract, as we've learned since, I mean, it was a long slog for the Bruins and Jeremy Swayman to get to 8.25 times 8 that he signed for. But there was a lot of other goalies on the sidelines waiting to see where that number would come in. And, Ottinger in particular, same age as Swayman. If you look at their cases side by side, I mean, fairly similar numbers and accomplishments to this point in their NHL careers. I can see why he ended up quite literally with the same deal, down to the bonuses and structure and everything, that Jeremy Swayman did. Linus Allmark, of course, took a 4-year deal. It wasn't 8 years. He's an older player, but, also got to that $8.25 million threshold. And so it was a market resetter in the end. I mean, the truth is Boston paid Swayman a little more than they wanted to. That's what it took to get that deal done. I think Dallas ended up paying Ottinger a little bit more than they wanted, but they realized, hey, if that comparable's out there, like that's basically the market right now for what you are. And, they got this contract done in 2 or 3 days. I mean, basically when they touched base over the summer, my understanding is they had a discussion along the lines of, we really like you, the player. We want to find a way to keep you, but, let's see where the market shakes out. I think that they were aware, of course, that this Swayman deal was going to come in before they would be doing a new contract. I do think the Stars and Ottinger were both comfortable even waiting till next summer, if that's what it took to get a deal done. But once that comparable was out there, it's probably only a few phone calls and they arrive at that deal. So I don't know that every goalie is going to end up. It's just kind of a weird place in time where Swayman reset the market, and there were other goalies that, I think can make comparable arguments or cases that he had. And so now you've got 3 on that cap number starting next season. 3 goaltenders, that is. But, I'm not sure every goalie from here on in that's any good is getting 8.25. I mean, you're still talking about upper tier goalies that are getting that number. And of course, let's not forget Igor Shesterkin, who had a pretty, he's put his play where his mouth is, if you want to say it. I mean, if he's turning down that $88 million contract, he's played pretty well out of the gates here to try to, get something north of 88 million. And so he might be setting the new market at some point here too, if and when he ggets a deal done with the Rangers.
I imagine Igor Shesterkin bristling at any notion of him making $8.25 million. Maybe $18.25 million.
Yeah, the team has already conceded on that front. I mean, they're offering him much more than that. And so, credit to him. When you turn down a big contract, I mean, there's some risk there, right? Like because that's a lot of money, and there's just the chance you get hurt. There's a chance you don't play well. There's a lot of things can go wrong in a season, but I mean, he's, pitched a shutout on opening night in Pittsburgh, and he's kept it rolling. The Rangers look pretty good to start this year. They won a big game in Toronto over the weekend. So, Shesterkin, I don't know if he's upping the pressure on the Rangers, but he's certainly removing any doubts that might be lingering about how the contract negotiation and the lack of a new deal is affecting his play to start the year.
Are you ready for questions, Chris Johnston?
Bring the heat, my man.
Yes, sir. I'll keep it with goalies to start with this first one. Jonas asks us, how likely is it that John Gibson finds a new home this season?
I think that trade's coming. John Gibson has missed the start of the season. He had an appendectomy. And so, he hasn't maybe been talked about as much because he's been recovering. But, obviously his name has been in trade rumors and trade discussions the last couple of years. He's getting closer and closer to the end of his contract. And so I think every year that kind of ticks off that, makes it a little more likely he's moved because the team making that kind of deal is taking on a little bit less of a burden in John Gibson. There's a few teams out there that might be thinking about goaltending. I mean, how would John Gibson look in Colorado, for example? I mean, there's, it's not just that Colorado struggled to get saves early in the year, specifically from Alexander Georgiev, but he's in the final season of his contract. I mean, he's not necessarily part of the long-term solution in Denver. And so you could at least see the world where that might make sense to the people involved there. So I do think that would not surprise me if this is a season ultimately, some point close to the deadline where Gibson's moved, or perhaps it's this coming summer. But, he's a veteran, he's established. I think there's some question with so long playing behind kind of a team not really trying to win, a team in transition, rebuilding. Some of his numbers, I think, paint a concerning picture, but, at his best, he was among the NHL's best. If you're a good team out there, you might be wondering in the back of your mind, in different environment, playing behind a better defense, could this guy get the job done for us?
John Gibson in a Colorado Avalanche uniform. I would just be happy for John Gibson, considering what he's gone through the last few years playing on an Anaheim Ducks team that has not made the playoffs, seeing his game take a fall back while still having that name and reputation as one of the better goalies from the United States. Like, I would be excited for him to play on a team that has Stanley Cup aspirations if they found a way to make that work.
Well, and remember too, like the other part of this equation is Anaheim, I think, has found their next guy, Lucas Dostal. Won the World Championship last year between the pipes for Czechia on home ice in Prague. Young goalie, showing a lot of promise. I don't know if he's 100% ready to run and play 55 games right now, but certainly I know they think very highly of him within that organization, and so. It's twofold. It's maybe trying to find John Gibson a place later in his career, as you say, to play more meaningful games, but also, at some point in time here, you're going to want to clear the way for the next one to, take the reins of the team. And I think Dostal is pretty close to doing that for the Ducks.
Next one from Congo Red. I'm very intrigued about this question.
Uh-oh.
What will CJ do if the Calgary Flames make a playoff spot? Thinking emoji from Adam Wild. I guess this means this was a topic of discussion on a recent SDP. This has to be it, because this is a very specific question that intrigues me, because one of us said something really interesting. If the Calgary Flames were to make a playoffs, are you willing to tell everyone what you said?
But apparently some things are
someone leaked it. Clearly,
nobody can. I guess some things that are said in the group chat don't stay in the group chat.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I said,
I just wanted to be known. I did not leak this. I did not do any of this.
I don't know.
It's not me.
Is Congo Red? Like, did you go create that profile and ask this question?
Congo Red has asked us questions before. True. Big Money CJ.
I didn't know if you had an alter ego out there, Julian, and you were just...
Me. And if it was an alter ego, it would not be Congo Red.
Okay. Well, what I said in the group chat, and because I stand by it, is that if the Flames make the playoffs, I will eat 10 O. Henry bars, which for our 100%ers, you'll know that O. Henry is a favored bar of my partner here, Julian. It's one that I'm not as high on in the chocolate bar power rankings. And so, I was really, it's not even that I was trying to hate on Calgary. I just was trying to say, like, everybody, let's just slow the roll. Like, I get you win 4 in a row. Like, it's exciting. Like, as I said, this was not meant for public consumption, but here we are. It's out there. So I will eat 10 O. Henry bars plus my own words if the Flames are a playoff team come April 2025.
I forgot it was 10. I thought it was like 3 or 4.
I think I said 10.
You did say 10. I had to go back on the screenshot. I thought it was like 3 or 4. When you said 10, I was like, oh my God.
And someone, is it Adam that screen grabbed it, or Steve? And like, they just keep like posting like the picture of me saying it.
It might have been producer
Drew or producer Nick. Yeah. Anyway. So yeah. I guess I just got to watch what I put in the screen in the group chat, because it just all of a sudden it's on the podcast. But
The only reason why I asked
and
this question is
I'm not here hating on the Flames. Like that isn't where this started. I just was
you're
more
not hating on the Flames.
But like I've got nothing against the Flames. Like if they make the playoffs, I think that'd be great. I love when there's excitement in Canadian markets. Like that's great. It was more about like, hey, let's just calm down. A team wins 3 or 4 in a row to win the year. It doesn't mean they're going to win the Stanley Cup. That was more the point I was trying to make. But anyway, here we are, and I really hope. That's the thing is now I don't want to eat 10 O. Henry bars. Like I would really rather do other things. like you to put in a hot dog. Yes,
on camera?
I would rather do that than 10 O. Henry bars. So now weirdly, now I have a take on the Flames. I guess now I got to hope that they don't keep this up.
I was surprised to see that question in the Discord, which, by the way, if you're not following the SDPN Discord, you should. And it's one thing for it to just be there, but it says like from Adam Wild. So that tells you that like they've discussed this on their own show. Or
maybe they hinted that they didn't get at what the exact stakes were. And now here we are. I'm just being dragged into the light, but 10 O. Henry bars. That's what's at stake, Flames fans. So
I bet you wish
you get to see your team play playoff games, and I get to have a sugar rush on a candy bar I don't really like that much.
I bet you wish you screened some of these questions now, huh?
I wish I just said like 10 Twix bars or something, or 10 something else I like a little better.
Like 50 Aero bars.
Oh, I would eat 50 Aeros over 10 O. Henrys.
Okay, I'll tell you this weird thing before I get to the next question. My phone sent me these reminders of from last year. These photos I took from the Heritage Classic between the Calgary Flames and the Edmonton Oilers. There's a point to the story. I remember being in the press box and enjoying the game. Obviously, it was outside. It was awesome. I took a photo of this basket of Aero chocolate bars because there were all these different chocolate bars that were there, and everyone took all of them and left all the Aero bars there. And my point, which maybe I've dropped in the group chat or not, but my point was to highlight the fact that your choice of chocolate bar is such an inferior one. A whole bunch of people left a whole bunch of Aeros back.
See, I just choose to see that as my colleagues thought I was covering the game, and they were leaving me my chocolate bar.
Okay, all right. Next question, Red Shark Pack. What do you think would be considered a successful day for the league when all 32 teams play on Tuesday? Staggered starts for those games, by the way.
I mean, I don't know how you measure that success. I suppose you'd want to attach some kind of viewership number, but I wouldn't know where to start. I mean, that's 16 games. And I think what's successful is if people are talking about the league. It's kind of a funny schedule because the only game Monday as a result is Tampa-Toronto, a game I'm going to today. But because everyone's loading up to play Tuesday, I like that they're doing this. I think that anything they can do to get some attention, not to mention it's just cool to have all the staggered starts and have, hockey on for a huge swath of the day and evening. I don't know how they measured success there though, other than, what social media looks like, the kind of impressions they're gathering and what sort of viewership those games themselves are drawing.
One more for you here. From Locked On Senators, where does Jake Sanderson rank in your view among NHL defensemen, and will he be on Team USA at the Four Nations?
Oof.
I think he's trending towards it right now.
He's trending towards it. That's a tough blue line, though.
Yeah, you're trying to get on a blue line. Quinn Hughes is a lock on that team. I really should have done like a mock like Team USA before looking at that question.
I did one. Yeah, I did one last year, and I don't think I would have had Sanderson on it. Now that being said, I did it last year around Christmas time, so it was, it's a long time ago. I remember they ran those pieces over the holidays. Yes. Team USA. Let's see who I had on there at the time.
Let's think about this. We're literally thinking about this live.
Projecting international rosters.
Adam Fox, Quinn Hughes, Charlie McAvoy. Those are 3 locks on this team. Are you putting Brock Faber on this team, who showed himself to already be one of the best defensemen after the season he had last year? Other guys like Jacob Slavin in Carolina, who's always been this steady presence as a Hurricane. Keandre Miller, Zach Werenski. Who else are we thinking?
Yeah, I mean it's a stacked blue line. So I'm not going to say whether he's on it or not. He's got a shot. Love the player. You can't help but notice just like a breakout machine when you watch him play. And, huge career ahead. I think the Senators were wise to lock him up to the deal they did when they did. But whether he gets on that Four Nations roster is going to be tough. I mean, Canada and the U.S. in particular have some difficult decisions there. Finland a little less so because it's all players coming from the NHL. And last I looked, there was maybe like 35 players of Finnish heritage to play this season in the league, but it's not really that many when you consider that 25 of them, give or take, will be on the roster. Sweden has some choices too, but Sanderson's one to watch. And if the Sens are going to get back to the playoffs themselves, I would think he's going to be a big part of it.
Noah Hannafin, John Carlson also names to consider for this as well. I don't know statistics specifically for, well, no, John Carlson, I think is off to a decent start himself too. Jake Sanderson, I'll say this. If he continues the start that he's on, I say yes. I think he's been I actually think he's been the Senators' best player their first 5 games of the season with the way that he's been able to play at both ends. And you mentioned the fact that he's been a good breakout machine. I think that plays into that as well. Again, I mentioned earlier in the show, tied for the league lead right now in power play points with Cale Makar. I say if he keeps this going, he very much, I think there's a spot for him.
Let's see. I don't know. I mean, what's cool about this whole tournament to me is a lot of these teams are turning over their teams, right? It's been so long since the last best on best. We're going to see a lot of newcomers on all these teams. And I think part of what's going to be hard or challenging for the decision makers is how many of those older players do you stick with just for continuity, for leadership, all those sorts of things? Or, obviously there's going to be a number of Team Canada and USA players making their debut in a best on best event because it's been 10 years almost since we saw one of these things.
Good Lord.
8 years, but still.
Yeah, come on. Jeez. 10 years. Don't do this.
Well, and I almost don't count that 2016 World Cup just because they had Team North America and stuff like it was best on best, but it was a little bit more gimmicky. Like probably the last pure best on best was 2014 Sochi, to be honest. And that's 11 years from February. So that's
bring Team North America back. I've made this point before. I get people want to say it's a gimmick. It was really cool to watch. I get they didn't go far in that tournament. It was still really cool to watch. Bring them back. Hey, so Chris Johnston's power went out by the time we were trying to end this episode. So that's why it's just me to end off today's episode of The CJ Show. We'll be back on Thursday with a brand new episode. Subscribe to our podcast. Hopefully no other power goes out by then. Bye.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.